Have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? I recently saw a video he made and I was shocked. He's in his 80s and still kicking butt and working out and staying active. He did this by just making one change. Chuck says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife even started doing this one thing too, and she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger, her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. Chuck made a special video that explains everything. Make sure you watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/inspired or by clicking on a link below this video. It'll change the way you think about your health. Once again, that's chuckdefense.com/inspired or click on a link in the description below to watch the video now. If the legendary Chuck Norris can do this at 81 years old, so can you. Watch his method by clicking on the link in the description box below, chuckdefense.com/inspired. Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Inspired live stream. Inspired Tribe, we're healthy, we're wealthy, we're whole, we're free. The mantra of the last 500 or so live streams. And welcome everybody on Rumble. Welcome everybody on YouTube. Welcome after the fact. I love reading all of your comments, so please let me know where you're tuning in from, what your thoughts are. Even later on in the comments, we love reading from you. In the live chat, I see Scarlett, I see John. Welcome, good to see you. Then we have Nicholas here. We have Johnny here. Michelle, good to see you, my friend. Michelle is also a graduate from a Yaddo graduate. Lyra is here, or Lyra, Brandy, Byrne. Good to see you all. Okay, friends. So the subject I want to talk about today has been a game changer for so many people. And for years, we used to do seminars on this. We would have 100, 200 people, and obligatory in the back of the audience were always two agents from various agencies, usually some intelligence agencies. You could spot them from a mile away. The beautiful thing was after about an hour, they were really interested in what we were talking about. One thing that I learned over all these years of studying, researching, and speaking is that the main reason that things remain in an undesirable state, the main reason is that people do not have knowledge about something. So they're uneducated on certain subjects. And oftentimes it simply wasn't part of their educational path, because this knowledge that I'm going to talk about has been hidden from the people for a very long time. It's not complicated to understand. As a matter of fact, when people finally see and hear it, they go, what? Hold on, wait, this is so simple. This is so logical. Why did I never know that? And so this is what we're going to go into today. Mainly, the problem that most people have been having over the last years was finally seeing that there is a complete imbalance between the government and all of its entities and sub-entities and subcontractors and whatnot, and the people. And because before that, it kind of sort of had been working out pretty good and people were doing okay, they didn't really think about these things too much. And now they're examining their relationship with the government. What's the government there for? Why did we create a government? What actually are their rights? What are their powers? What are our rights? All of this has become more and more important. And so that's what we're going to talk about. I encourage you to stick around because there's so much clarity in this. As I said, many, many aha moments for many people. Now, I want to say from the get-go, I'm not an anti-government person. As a matter of fact, I've met many great people that are in various institutions working within the government that I really respect. But I had an eye-opening experience many, many years ago that showed me how little people pretty high up actually know. So before I go into this presentation that I put together for you, Christine and I were in a meeting. We were part of a campaign many years ago. The way that I got into it was through music, because I'd written a song, and then it turned out to be much more than that. But we had a meeting and we were invited into an internal strategy meeting that we actually should have no business being in, but we were there. And there was a main candidate, and then his team and his attorney and the PR agency, and everybody was there. And so they were discussing the campaign strategy moving forward, what kind of billboards they were going to run, what kind of media ads and whatnot. And so eventually, I forgot what I said, but I said something about the role of government and making it clear who the government is and who the people are, and that the government is there to serve the people. And the attorney looked at me like as if I was completely crazy, and he said, well, that is a romanticized and completely reality detached a statement that you just made. It's not at all how it is. The government has emancipated itself, and now it rules the people. And we're not here to rock this boat. He didn't speak for the candidate, by the way. He spoke for himself. But I just thought, wow. So this is how you view it. I mean, it was a cynical, attorney-like typical observation. So when I laid out, because that triggered me, and I laid out to him how it really works. And eventually you could see his wheels turning, and he said, oh, I never really thought about these things in depth. So without further ado, I want to show you what the proper relationship actually is between the people and the government. No matter where you are in the world, this actually applies. Okay, so let's go into it. We have no matter what your belief or spiritual belief system really is, as long as you have a spiritual understanding of a creator, all-encompassing God consciousness, whatever you call it, you will understand this concept here. If you don't, then you have a place in this system too, but it's different. So there is an all-encompassing, all that is consciousness, God the creator, from which everything emanates. So in a very simplistic manner, we could say that God created man and women, right? Very simplistic. There's a lot in between, and there's a lot after and before, but God created men and women. And God gave men and women natural, absolute rights. We're going to get into those. They come with birth. Because of your existence, those rights are there. You don't have to write them down. They don't have to be part of a document in order for them to exist. They're not granted. They're there. Okay? We're going to look at what they are. Men and women have over time created something that they called government or system for specific purposes. And they have transferred some of their rights, relative rights. What does that mean? They're revocable. They're revocable rights. The men and women can always revoke what they have transferred to the government. Okay? So they are relative and they are transferred. They're transferred from the people. The people hold all the rights. Okay? So let's move forward to that. That's important to understand. That's the natural order and hierarchy in which things were created. God the creator first, men and women second, system and government third. Of course, there's a lot in between, but this is the gist of it. What are those natural rights? First off, we need to understand they are universal and inalienable and are not dependent on the laws, customs, or beliefs of any particular culture or government. This is very important to understand, that the rights that I'm talking about are not dependent on whether something culturally changes or the direction of the government changes or religious streams change even. None of it has any impact on those rights that you and I have because we're born, okay? Freedom, fundamental, overarching freedom. That's a right that you're born with. There are times where you might have to defend it because others don't respect it. Whatever the circumstances are, it does never, ever mean that that's not your natural right. Freedom, self-determination, the right, the natural right to determine your life and what happens to you and your being, the person that you reside in, if you will, the being that you reside in. All of that is part of self-determination, which includes any and all decisions as to what you put in your body, on your body, what you do with your body, as long, that's a stipulation, of course, as long as you don't hurt anyone else or anyone else's property. We're going to get to that. The fulfillment of essential needs. everything that you need to fulfill to survive: food, water, clothing, shelter, the basic fundamental needs. You have the absolute right to provide that for yourself. Again, you don't have the right to steal it from someone else. You have the right to provide it for yourself. Okay, so this is a natural right. Because you exist, this is there. The right to express yourself freely, which is part of self-determination. The right to free speech and free belief. It's not even religion. Religion is already a system. You can believe whatever you want. It's up to you. Whatever you want to believe, go ahead and believe it. You have the freedom to do so. You have the freedom to say whatever you want. Okay? And the right to protect and defend yourself. That is completely out of any debate and discussion. These are absolute rights that you hold. Okay? There's no doubt about it. Each individual is entitled to exclusive control of his choices, his actions, and his body, of course, her body as well, because no individual has the right to control the peaceful activities of other self-owning individuals, like their religious practices, their occupations, or their pastimes. No such power can be properly delegated to government. Legitimate governments are therefore severely limited in their authority. What this statement says is what I just said before, but it also says you cannot transfer a right to the government that you yourself never had, or a power that you yourself never had. And this is where we get into the vast, vast ocean of problems that today's governments pose because of their ignorance. Before I move forward, I want to quickly say that the portion of people with ill intent, ill will within the government is actually smaller than we might think. The portion of people within and outside of government who are ignorant to these principles, and the ones that I'm going to share, is much bigger. They simply don't know. They don't understand it anymore. They're indoctrinated into a stream of thought. They've never been taught these things, and it's just not part of their thought process. And that's the bigger problem, that we have ignorant, uneducated people in that regard, in and outside of the government. And with ignorant and uneducated, I don't mean to sound even condescending. It's just a fact that people don't understand this concept. They weren't taught this concept. They never thought about it. And so it has to be taught again, because the way that we truly transform something is through knowledge and wisdom, applied knowledge and wisdom, not through force and violence. I don't want to overthrow any governments. I've had conversations about these things with people from law enforcement, from intelligence agencies, from military, from executive, from legislature, from judicial, anywhere. I mean, we talked to so many people, and though there were very few who actually understood these principles, most didn't. Even judges, we talked to judges that didn't understand this, and further. And then there were some that we talked to that perfectly understood this, and they never wanted the people to find out this. They never want the people to learn about this. Those are the ones that are the problem. They know this, but they don't want anyone else to know it because they know what kind of problem that would pose. Okay. Understanding the role of the government. The primary purpose of government is to protect the people from the illegitimate use of force. This is basically, basically creating an army for the protection of the borders or of a nation. For the protection of a nation, you create some sort of a army, a military body. This is the primary purpose of a government, is that kind of protection, because naturally, people that are within a geographical area have certain shared interests that they want protected. But mainly, it's about the illegitimate use of force by anybody. So this is the main purpose of government. Everything else that we added to the government is not really included in the main purpose. Okay? All acts of aggression against the rights of others, whether committed by individuals or by governments, are unjust. Let me read this again. All acts of aggression against the rights of others, whether committed by individuals or by governments, are unjust. These are things we need to breathe into our DNA, friends. We need to breathe these truths into our DNA so we can embody them again. This is what all of this talk is about here, okay? I'm going to read this to you. Governments may not use force against their own citizens unless doing so is necessary to prevent the illegitimate use of force by one individual or group against another. So we have decided that the government can interfere to fulfill its role to protect someone against illegitimate force. Okay? This prohibition entails that governments may not engage in censorship, military conscription, price controls, confiscation of property, or any other type of intervention that curtails the voluntary and peaceful exercise of an individual's right. And this is, of course, where we are and where we have been, where there is no government in the world any longer that even pretends to adhere to these foundational principles. The reason is, once again, on both sides, within the people and within the government, these absolute truths have been lost. They haven't been learned and embodied. And when knowledge is lost, then the way of life begins to change accordingly, right? So today, the definitions of what government protection means, keeping you safe is totally different than protecting you from unjust violence or force. That's a wholly different concept. Just like a constitutional republic is a completely different concept than a democracy. They just switched up the terms, right? Okay. Where do government rights come from? The government has no rights on its own, and any and all rights and powers are derived from the consent of the governed. Okay, from the consent of the governed. I want to, for a moment here, do this here, probably. Okay. Here there are two steps that most people don't understand are steps. There is number one, nowhere in your life where you consciously asked, whether before or after your 18th or 21st birthday, depending on what the statutes in your nations are, were you ever asked and said, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, can you come in? We'd like to discuss something with you. Here's how it works. We have a system in place. It's called the government, and there's a judicial system in place. There are laws in place. There are rules and regulations, stipulations. All that is in place. However, we want to let you know, because nobody's ever told you this, you are not automatically subject to this, because if you were automatically subject to this, you would be a slave, which we prohibit slavery. We prohibit it. That's our government does it to prohibit slavery. So you have to actually agree to be part of this. You have to agree to play by all of the little rules and stipulations that we made up. And if you don't, that's totally fine, because you naturally own your body of self-determination. You have natural rights and all of that. Now, however, if you don't participate, we might not be willing to protect you any longer, but that's maybe fine with you. No one had that conversation with you, and no one said, well, if you sign here, you actually will from here on out consciously and voluntarily exercise the rights of a legal person and its duties and obligations, taxation and all that. Nobody says that. Nobody ever in any country has ever done that. But that's what should have happened. You should have consciously consented to enter the legal system, the legal apparatus, the government apparatus, and you should have consented to be governed by an entity, which means that they give you parameters in which you can live, express yourself, and all of that. None of this has happened. It was what? Implied. You received an adapter. Usually in most nations, the birth certificate is the adapter into the system. Without it, you don't legally exist, and if you don't legally exist, you're not part of the system. They always say it's horrible when that happens because they can't protect you. But they also can't make you do stuff that you probably don't want to do. So other side of this, what I'm saying is we need to have these very, very open, transparent, and clear conversations. Because if we don't know these things, it's just implied that we consent. It's implied that we play along. And now the only option that the education system currently provides for people who do not consent, well, that's what elections are for. So you can elect a different government, but it never says you can decline. That's never in there. The thing is, as long as we're going to live together as a group of people and we're going to share, let's say, a quite, small space in towns and cities and suburbs and whatnot and villages. I mean, we share space together. As long as that happens, we're always going to agree to put certain structures in place that help everybody and that are there for everybody. That's what it should be. That's what it should be. It should serve everybody. It should help everybody and support everybody. That's what a system is there for. Currently, and we're going to get to that, it is all completely turned upside down. But here's one more time. The government has no rights on its own. The government isn't a natural born being that has, because of its birth, received any rights. It isn't. It's an artificial construct that every right and every power, it derives from the people. Whatever we give them, and we can only give what we have. We can't give them powers we don't have. Those powers they invent. And that's illegitimate in and of itself. Okay. Here is what they have done and how they look at it. Whether consciously or unconsciously, I would say probably a small minority was conscious in creating this, and the vast majority of people within government simply don't understand it. They have pretty much removed God and the creator from the equation. And they have said, we, the government, we have absolute rights and powers. And we give you, our subjects, granted conditional privileges. They don't call it that, but this is how it plays out. And you have to understand that if you don't believe me, then let me tell you, in our society, whether you live in Central Europe, in Australia, in Asia, in Europe, Africa, almost everything is outlawed unless it is allowed under certain conditions. Almost everything is outlawed. Almost every activity is outlawed unless it's allowed under certain conditions. So basically, our system is upside down. It says everything's forbidden unless we give you permission, unless we give you permits or licenses, where you have to fulfill certain requirements, you have to pay for them, and then we give them to you. So this is how currently the government works. Driving is outlawed. Operating a business is outlawed. Flying is outlawed. Swimming in most places is outlawed. Hunting, which means feeding yourself, if that's part of it, or even gathering, is outlawed. All of these things are forbidden unless you have a permit, purchase a license, or qualify for a license by fulfilling certain requirements. So this system has turned everything upside down. It is said we have the absolute rights and the absolute powers, and we give you, the subjects, we grant you conditional privileges. This is how far all of this has come. And so what our main objective is together is to everybody. I'm talking to those people in government, the law enforcement, the military, the agencies, the health sector, every part of government. I do not hate you. I don't want you to go away. I sure want the government to become much, much, much more smaller. I would say we can probably reduce it reasonably within a reasonable amount of time. And with proper planning, we can bring it down to 20 to 10% of its current size and make sure that these people are wonderfully integrated into the economy. So that would be a slow phase out. And we would have a very efficient and a good and a correct government. That's what I'm suggesting. I'm not in for the fight. I'm not in for the overthrow. I'm not in for some insurrection or something like that. I think if everybody begins to learn these things, understand these things, and the principles by which we live together, we can fix this in a civilized, beautiful, and harmonious way. That's the whole purpose. That's why I've been talking about these things, and we have for 15, 20 years now. So that's what it has turned into, whether they're aware of it or not. But this is the reality today. The government sees itself as everything. Of course, there are people behind the government. Of course, there are interest groups and secret societies and cabals. We know this, right? But this is how it presents itself. There's a universal common law, and that universal common law says do no harm, and that includes the men and the women and their properties, right? Do no harm. That is the universal common law. If we understand that, we could eliminate 95% of the rules and regulations, because 95% of the rules and regulations are sub-expressions of this universal law. Now, here's the thing. When you combine your universal, natural, God-given rights and pair them with this universal common law, do no harm to anybody else or their property, then your need to be governed or micromanaged is eliminated. If for some reason people do not adhere to this universal common law, then that's what the government is there for. That's what law enforcement, the judicial system, correction system is there for. That's what these processes are there for people who are either ignorant or disrespectful or for some other reason do not play by this one universal rule, do no harm. And then everybody collectively, through the instrument of the government, has the right to protect itself. And then they go, okay, this person is harming others. It's harming other people's properties. We need to do something about it. Whether we need to educate them, make sure they understand how it really works, whether they need some sort of correction or punishment, so because they don't want to learn it. All of these things are legitimate when people break this one law, because then a body of people has the right? Just like when we have a murderer or a rapist or something like, we have the right to lock them away, make sure, or, if it needs to happen in terms of ultimate self-protection, to remove them permanently in order to protect our children and our families and so forth and our properties. But this is really how simple the whole structure is. And if we embody our rights and if we embody this one universal law, guess what? We will get to this place once again where we understand spiritually, physically, mentally, on all levels that where we were created, that which we were created from, gave us, that universal God creator gave us those rights and instructed us through all means possible to not do harm. And then we have created a system in a government that helps us with certain tasks, only those to which we consent. And if we do no harm, that system and that government never has the right to pretend that it is above us and that it can rule over us and that it can make decisions for us and it can tell us what to do. And that, my friends, it's that simple. I encourage you to share and bookmark this live stream. Take these graphics and read them as often as you need to, because it's really how the hierarchy should work. And if we can finally, once again, educate our children about this, talk to them about it, not in a combative way, not in a hateful way, because again, ignorance and non-education is a problem here. They don't know. If I walk into any given government agency today and I say, can you please draw the proper hierarchy? I put God, I put the people in the government in there, they will get it wrong. they would get it wrong. If I asked them, what is the main purpose for government? Where do governments get their rights from? Where do people get their rights from? They don't know these things anymore. And they don't want to know. They just want to do their job and go home and get their paycheck. But we have to know again. We have to become adults again. We have to become responsible beings again. And what this mainly is, my friends, is spiritual understanding. I know so many people in the sovereign and freedom movement, they took this knowledge, they took this understanding, better yet, and they used it to confront everyday police officers who are not bad people. They use this to go out in traffic and cause all kinds of problems and to drive around without license plates and licenses, which is a right. Don't get me wrong. The right for you to move freely and move about freely and travel. But if you use your energy to go into this confrontation daily, rather than using it to really embody this on all levels and help others see this, then if we can use this energy in a positive way and this knowledge in a positive way, we can create transformation without the violence, without the confrontation, because this applies to everybody. And in 2020, 21, and 2022, a lot of the government employees have felt the other side of that coin. They suddenly felt, oh shit, now I'm implied here too. My family is subject to this too. My family is subject to this complete overreach tyranny as well. And so this has changed a lot of minds, but we need to continually educate ourselves. We need to continually bring this knowledge out and help everybody see this. Whether your particular nation government system is very far removed from these principles or closer to them does not change the absolute truth of what I stated here. This is the truth. This is how it works. And the further your government is away is also a reflection on how far the people are from this knowledge. Because a government ultimately is a reflection of the average consciousness of the people. Unfortunately, that is the case. Even when it's illegitimately put in place, that also says something about the people and what they're willing to accept. So to me, knowledge is the application of knowledge and application of wisdom is true power. That's how we can really shift things around. All righty, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being here with us. We hope this helped in some way. Again, please bookmark this. Feel free to go through it often and share it with others. Invite them into the conversation. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll be back with you again very, very soon.